Welcome back, friends. So, our reading for today, January 16th, from the book Living Wisely, Living Well by Swami Kriyananda. Cultivate the art of brevity. A single well-phrased sentence will be long remembered, whereas long discourses are usually soon forgotten. In writing this book too, I have tried to make every sentence as short and concise as possible. Meandering sentences often lose themselves like country paths in the unkempt grass of tangled thinking. Om. I remember reading many years ago some philosophical writings of a very well-known philosopher. I began with enthusiasm, but as I proceeded through the pages, my enthusiasm began to fade. The content, the words, the structure, the presentation were so heavy that my own thoughts began to become tangled in their verbiage. And after a few pages, I had to give up the book. Then I turned my attention to the scriptures. And what a breath of fresh air it was. Simple, direct, and uplifting. Weighty prose, friends, we all have experienced at one time or the other, tend to close our mind and heart. Many of us will know of the famous KISS principle, KISS, keep it short and simple. I must confess, long emails are something I do not enjoy reading. And when I come across a long email, I tend to look at the introduction and the end and try to skim the content in between. George Burns, one of the famous late comedians, said it very rightly when he said, excuse me, that the secret of a good sermon is to have a good introduction and a good ending, and to keep the two as close to each other as possible. I have found personally the writings of Swami Kriyanandaji very inspiring and very helpful, very uplifting. And that is because Swamiji's writings are simple yet very profound. And that is the essence of brevity. It is said that Swamiji once edited a letter over 50 times, simply to get the vibration of the letter correct, to make sure that he had chosen the right word correctly, to make it as perfect as possible, and to convey the message as clearly and as lovingly as possible. One of the famous Academy Award acceptance speech is said to be just two words, and that is thank you. Friends, we will remember, as Rudyard Kipling said, that words are one of the most powerful drug used by mankind. How do we use our words? It is said that in an age of frivolous communication, where casual is a norm, brevity is almost looked down upon today. It is not uncommon to find as a signature at the end of short text messages this line which says, please excuse brevity and or typos, almost apologizing for brevity. So as we talk, it's also interesting that I have to talk so much about brevity for the next 20 minutes, but I want to promise that I won't speak to cover time. I will speak as much as is sufficient to talk about brevity. I want to take a few moments to look at what brevity means. We tend to associate brevity with short sentences, but brevity is not only about long or short sentences. It is more about the appropriateness of our communication. Sometimes a word is good. Sometimes a line will do. Sometimes it takes a nice story to convey a message. Sometimes it may simply be a look. But brevity shouldn't be terse or cold or indifferent in its vibration. And this is where, friends, we will find that we need to put our attention, our energy consciously when we write or when we speak. It is said, Pascal had said that if I had more time, I would make this letter a little shorter. Yoganandaji would sometimes tell his disciples that I wish I wouldn't have to scold so often or explain things so much. I prefer to speak with my eyes. In fact, in the autobiography of a yogi, Yoganandaji talks about his gurus, Swami Sri Yukteswarji's discourses. They were clothed in brevity, and I want to read those few lines that Yoganandaji mentions in the book Autobiography because they reveal the essence of brevity. Quote, his every utterance, that is Sri Yukteswarji's, was measured and chiseled by wisdom. A sublime self-assurance marked his mode of expression. It was unique. His thoughts were weighed in a delicate balance of discrimination before he permitted them an outward garb. The essence of truth, all pervasive, with even a physiological aspect, came from him like a fragrant exudation of the soul, quote unquote. This is also, friends, the soul of brevity. It calls for self-discipline, clarity, simplicity, and honesty in our communication. Also to remember that brevity, as it is good now. Sorry, friends, there were some technical glitches. And I will start over again. There's the last 30 seconds? Okay. Okay, so I was talking about brevity and the importance of self-discipline, clarity, sincerity, honesty, and simplicity in while writing or speaking. And I read a few lines. I'll read it again in case we missed it because of the technical issue. I mentioned about Yoganandaji speaking about his guru's discourses in the autobiography of a yogi, because it's a beautiful example and reveals the essence of brevity. And I will read exactly as Yoganandaji writes in the autobiography. So he talks about his master. His every utterance was measured and chiseled by wisdom. A sublime self-assurance marked his mode of expression. It was unique. He spoke as none other, in my experience, ever spoke. His thoughts were weighed in a delicate balance of discrimination before he permitted them an outward garb. The essence of truth, all pervasive, with even a physiological aspect, came from him like a fragrant exudation of the soul. So beautifully expressed. Brevity. In this age of casual communication, brevity, as we saw, is not much favored. In fact, you will find in a group, if there is a group of people, and if they're not talking all the time, people think there is something wrong with the group. If someone prefers silence, they think the person is boring or uninteresting. But here we get to see in the words of the masters that brevity is a soul expression. It is an expression of truth. So when we are speaking, if our words are intended to impress or flatter or to criticize or to justify, then they are inessentials and not part of the truth that we are trying to express. And the art, as Robert Louis Stevenson would say, is to omit it. And I want to share a story in this regard. This is the story of the two swans and the turtle. So, in a pond, village pond, there lived many years ago two swans and a turtle. They were great friends. And the turtle loved to talk, and she loved to hear herself talk. And many years passed by as their friendship grew. They came to a point where the village began to see a dry spell. The rains did not fall for many months. And soon the little pond in which they would live their daily lives dried up, and the swans decided to move to a new place where they could find a pond with water. So they came to the turtle to tell her of their plans. The turtle was alarmed because she was alarmed that there would be no one to hear her talk and she would lose her good friends. So she told them, "No, take me with you. Don't leave me alone here." But the swans were surprised as to how could they take the turtle with them, because the turtle didn't know how to fly. But because the turtle pleaded to go with them, they decided to work on a plan and come back to the turtle. After a few days, the swans came back with a plan, and they told the turtle, "This is what we will do. We will take a stick, and both of us swans, we will hold both ends of the stick, each one at both ends, and you can hold the stick in the middle. But remember, as long as we are carrying you on the stick, you cannot speak." So the turtle happily agreed, and the trio set forth to find a new pond. Soon they were sailing over treetops, and the turtle, which had never flown before, was excited, and she was almost going to exclaim, "Oh, look how beautiful and how high we are." But she remembered the swan's warning and kept quiet. Soon they were passing over a little town, and the villagers gathered in the little town suddenly saw this strange sight of two swans flying and a turtle in the middle. And they pointed and looked, "Oh, look, look, look at that turtle flying, how strange." And the turtle was again going to say, "Oh, why don't you just mind your own business?" But she remembered the swan's warning and kept her mouth shut. And as they progressed in their flight, again, a few villagers gathered at some part of the village, looking up, seeing the strange sight again, exclaimed, "Oh, look at that silly turtle flying." Now the turtle could not hold herself, and she opened her mouth to say, "Oh, hush, you foolish people." But she couldn't finish her sentence and she fell off the stick. But to say, friends, that in our communication, if we can learn to let go of what is inessential, of what is irrelevant, we can spare ourselves many foolish misadventures in communication. Another aspect I want to emphasize on in brevity is the importance of silence and the great role that silence plays in communicating the message. Many in a brief message, there is much to read between the lines, between the words, and that is felt in the silence, in our inner silence. I want to share again a story from Swami Kriyanandaji's life, which he shares of his time with Master. And this is of a time when he had just arrived at Mount Washington, and he was with another brother disciple, Bernard, outside the Mount Washington headquarters. And after some time, Master sent Bernard inside to fetch something from the house. And Swamiji suddenly found himself alone in a private moment with Master. He was very excited because this was the very first time he had gotten to be alone with Master ever since his discipleship. And so he was excited at all the different questions he could ask Master, the new things that he could learn. But Master didn't seem to show that enthusiasm because he didn't make any efforts to speak. Nevertheless, Swamiji decided to make the move and to break the ice. And so he proceeds to ask Master. Now, before I mention what he asked Master, I just want to say that he, after the discipleship initiation, he had just been taught a technique of communing with the Om vibration. And so he asked Master, "Master, what does Om sound like?" Master give a prolonged Om, and quietly relapsed into his quiet state. Now, to Swamiji, the silence was anything but comfortable. He persisted, and so the next question he asked Master again, though he knew the answer to it, he asked Master, "How do I hear the sound?" This time, Master didn't even bother to speak or answer. He simply got into the position the mudra devotee needs to assume to hear the sound, the Om sound. And he stayed in that position for a while and then again lapsed back into silence. So, thus ended Swamiji's first private encounter with Master. And he was just beginning to understand a way of life that Master exhorted his disciples to live, a way of silence. He would often say, "Silence is the altar of spirit." And disciples working around Master were often told to speak only when necessary. In fact, some months later, again, when Swamiji told Master about his experience in meditation, and especially that he was finding it difficult to calm his thoughts, to calm his breath in meditation, Yoganandaji interestingly told him, "That is because you used to talk a lot, and that influence has carried over." Now, it's an interesting point for all of us to ponder about and bring into practice in our own life. Are we, when we converse, when we talk, what is the intent of our conversations? Is it to uplift? Is it to uplift, to help? Is our conversation useful, or is it just a mindless use of words to entertain? Dear friends, it dissipates energy when we are not consciously directing words to a higher end. And I want to share a few tips in practicing brevity. One is speak only when it is important, and speak only that which is important. There is this beautiful story of Saint Anthony of the desert. The Bishop of Alexandria had invited Saint Anthony to speak in defense of Christ's divinity. In the early Christian era, the Arian heresy, which rejected the claim of Christ's oneness with God, that was rife, and debates were raging all over Christendom. And none could quell this heresy. And so the bishop had requested St. Anthony to help him with this rebellion. So St. Anthony, who had spent many, many years in the desert in fervent prayer and meditation, it is said that he entered the room that was loud and noisy with debates. And the moment he entered the room, a great hush fell over the room. And he said only 4 words, "I have seen him." And those 4 words, spoken with such power of all those years of prayer and meditation, healed the doubts of many people that noisy words could not. And that, friends, is the power of carefully chosen words. As Swamiji writes, that even in this book, Living Wisely, Living Well, he has carefully chosen words to make every sentence as short and concise as possible. Brevity should not lack clarity or accuracy. But when we sacrifice brevity, there is a high chance that we sacrifice clarity and accuracy. So again, for us to remember that when we speak, are we speaking to impress? Are we speaking to flatter? Are we speaking to fill up time or space? These are a few important points to keep in mind. Always important to keep in mind also that the biases of our consciousness always are a huge whale that we are trying to fight as we evolve in our journey in life, and to keep in mind that what we say and what we do does not fall a victim to those biases. To consciously, as Swamiji said, even if it takes sometimes maybe 50 times to edit something, to make truth shine, if we can take that effort, it is an effort well rewarded. And I want to close with a simple story about a reporter who had just found a wonderful news scoop, and he couldn't wait to tell his editor about it. And so he sends a message to his editor saying, "Sir, I have found a very exciting news and I want to write about it." So the editor says, "Go ahead and write about 600 words." The reporter was taken aback, slightly depressed, and quickly again responds with a message saying, "Sir, the story is so good, it can't be told in anything less than 1,200 words." And the editor responded, "My son, the story of the world's creation has been told in less than 600 words. Try it." And so, friends, with that message, I would like to close this. Try it. God bless you.